I was basting the turkey when my phone rang. The house smelled like butter and rosemary, and the grandkids were doing what grandkids do, making enough noise to convince the neighbors we were raising a herd of elephants in the living room. My son Mark was in the kitchen with me, pretending he knew what he was doing with the mashed potatoes. Football hummed on the TV in the background. It was our normal Thanksgiving chaos. Only one thing was off. My daughter, Emily, was late. She's never late. She's the type who arrives 10 minutes early and sits in the driveway so she doesn't look eager. I texted her an hour earlier. "You on your way, honey?" No answer. I told myself she was driving and being responsible. Then my phone lit up on the counter, vibrating right next to the salt shaker. "Emily," I said, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "About time." I hit accept, cheerful, ready to nag her for being late. What I heard on the other end knocked that right out of me. "Mom, help me. He's keeping me in his car." Her voice was shredded, high, panicked, like she was trying not to scream. My heart went cold and then started pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. "Em, where are you?" I barked, already ripping a pen from the junk drawer like that was gonna help. "Are you hurt?" No, but he's here. He's watching me. He locked the doors." She sounded like she was crying and holding it back with her teeth. "He's been following me, Mom, for weeks. I sent you my location. Did you get it? Please, I don't know what to do." I yanked the phone away from my ear, fingers slipping on the screen until I saw it. A little blue link from her shared location app. My chest hurt. "Got it. Don't hang up," I said, grabbing my keys from the hook. "Mark!" He came running in like I'd yelled fire. "What's wrong?" His eyes went straight to my face. He went pale. "What happened?" "It's Emily. She's in someone's car. Some man. We're going." I didn't even tell him more than that. There wasn't time. I jammed my feet into the first pair of shoes I found, didn't even remember putting them on later, and we were out the door. "Mom, he keeps saying he just wants to talk." She sniffled into the phone, voice cracking. I could hear a man's voice in the background, low and muffled. "He's been following me, Mom, for weeks. I thought I was going crazy. I didn't want to worry you. Oh, God, he's coming closer." "Em." I made my voice flat, the way I used to when she and Mark were small and no one brushed their teeth. "Listen to me. Stay on the phone. Don't argue with him. If you can open the door, you run. You hear me?" Mark had my phone out of my hand before I could stop him, plugging it into the car's Bluetooth as he backed out of the driveway so fast I heard something in the garage rattle and fall. "Em, it's Mark," he said, tight and clipped. "We're coming. I've got your pin. Don't hang up." We sped through our quiet little Kentucky cul-de-sac like we were in an action movie, except when it's your kid on the line, it doesn't feel cool or dramatic. It just feels like you might throw up. "Do I call 911? I asked him, already reaching for my own phone. "Yes," he said, "now." So I did. My hands were shaking as I told the dispatcher my daughter's name, her location, that she was being held in some stranger's car. The woman on the other end was calm, steady, said officers were on the way, told us not to engage if it was unsafe. That was cute. We weren't not engaging. The map on the screen showed her dot in some strip mall area, about 15 minutes away if you drove like a sane person. Mark was not a sane person that day. I watched the ETA tick down as he raced through yellow lights and probably ran a red one I was too busy praying to notice. "Em, you still with us?" Mark asked. "Yes." I could hear her breathing hard. He just keeps saying he knows me, but I don't know him. He makes me feel sick, Mark. The man's voice rose in the background. "I just want to talk, Emily. Please. I think we got off on the wrong foot." "Don't use my name," she snapped, then hissed to us. "He's known where I work. He knows our building. He's been outside every day. He said he'd wait as long as it took." I felt something twist inside me, like my ribs were bending. I raised my kids to be careful, to respect people, but not to be fools. Emily is 36, VP of something complicated at some big company in Louisville. Mark teaches physics at the university.
We're as boring as they come. PTA meetings, casseroles, the same Christmas ornaments since the Reagan administration. We don't have stalkers. We don't have scenes like this.
Yet, there we were, squealing into a half-empty parking lot in front of a Dollar Tree and a nail salon where my daughter's blue Honda sat crooked across 2 spots. Next to it, a faded black sedan. I saw her first, her face pressed to the passenger side window of the sedan, eyes wide and red, cell phone clutched in her hand. A young man sat in the driver's seat, leaning toward her, one hand up like he was trying to calm her down. He turned as our car screeched to a stop. We locked eyes for a second through the windshield. He didn't look like a monster. That almost made it worse. He looked 20-ish, tall, too thin, brown hair too long in front like he hadn't had a proper haircut in a while. No mask, no weapon, no crazed grin. Just this oddly intense, desperate expression. I didn't care what he looked like. I was out of the car and at his door before my knees remembered they were 67 years old. "Get away from my daughter!" I shouted, slamming both palms on his window. He jumped, and in that moment, Emily must have hit something because the passenger door popped open. She practically fell out, scrambling away from him and around the hood of the car, straight into Mark's arms. He wrapped her up, putting himself between her and the guy. "You okay?" he murmured, but his eyes were on the stranger. That's what I was calling him in my head already. The stranger. The stranger put his hands up, palms out like we were cops. His eyes darted from me to Emily to Mark, then back. I'm not trying to hurt her," he said, voice shaking. "I swear. I just wanted to—" "You locked me in your car," Emily sobbed behind me. "You grabbed the door when I tried to get out." "I panicked," he said. "You keep running from me. I thought if you'd just listen." The rage that had been building in my chest found its feet. "And why," I asked quietly, my voice shaking, "is my daughter running from you? Who are you? What do you want?" He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. The siren saved him. 2 police cars rolled into the lot, lights flashing, sirens cutting off as they swung in behind us. Within seconds, the scene was full of uniforms and calm, firm commands. "Step away from the vehicle, sir. Ma'am, is this the man who was holding you in the car? Everyone take a breath, please." I clutched my daughter's hand like I could anchor her back to earth. She was trembling head to toe. "That's him. He's been following me. For a month, outside my office, outside my gym. I keep seeing him. I thought I was imagining it. Then today, he just appeared at my car, and when I got in, he got in too and locked the doors. Ma'am, I never—" he started, but the officers already had him turning around, patting him down, asking for ID. "One thing at a time," one of the older cops said, looking between Emily and me. "We'll get your statement. You're safe now." Safe. I didn't believe that for a second. Safe would have been my daughter on my couch with a plate of turkey and stuffing, and her biggest worry being whether I'd made my usual dry cornbread dressing. This was some other story entirely. The strangers of the world had found us. They didn't arrest him that day. That shocked me more than it should have, I guess. I thought he kept me in his car, and he's been following me for a month would be enough to slap cuffs on anybody. But the parking lot cameras were blurry, and there were no witnesses to him physically forcing her in, no weapon, no threats. His record was clean. He said he just wanted to talk. She panicked. Things escalated. "He grabbed my arm when I tried to get out," Emily insisted in the little side room at the police station where they took our statements. "He leaned across me and held the door." "Did he say anything threatening?" the officer asked, pen hovering. "He just kept saying, 'I need you to hear me out,' like we were old friends or something. I've never seen him before in my life." The officer scribbled that down, impassive. They let the stranger go after a few hours with a strong warning. Told him if he went near her again, then they'd arrest him. We could get a restraining order, they said. Follow up with the county attorney. They gave us pamphlets. Actual glossy pamphlets. Like this was a support group and not my daughter's life. On the drive home, Emily stared out the window, arms wrapped around herself like she was cold. Mark drove with both hands on the wheel, his jaw clenched. I sat in the back seat, clutching my purse so hard the leather creaked.
I kept thinking about the look on the stranger's face when they asked him why he was following her.
"I just wanted to talk," he'd said again. That desperate tone. "She has to know the truth." What truth? He'd looked at her like, well, not like a man looks at a woman he's obsessed with. There was no lust there, no hungry appraisal. I've seen that look before in my life, and I know it. This was something else. Almost pleading. It unnerved me. "Mom," Emily said suddenly, turning around in her seat so fast I jumped. Her eyes were red, mascara streaked down her cheeks. "I'm not coming for Thanksgiving. I know that sounds stupid after all this, but I can't. I need to go home. I need to shower. I feel like his touch is still on my arm." "Sweetheart, of course," I said immediately. "We'll save you a plate. Do you want me to stay with you tonight, or you stay with me?" She shook her head hard, turning back to the window. "No, I just want to lock my door and forget today happened." Mark and I exchanged a look. The kind of look that says, we know that's not going to happen. You have to understand something about me. I'm not naturally suspicious. I grew up when you could leave your front door open and your bike in the yard and no one gave you lectures about it. I take people at face value until they give me a reason not to. But motherhood rewired my brain. Suddenly, every man in a parking lot was a potential threat. Every speeding car a missile aimed at my child. Once that switch flips, it never fully flips back. It just gets quieter. That Thanksgiving, it roared to life again. I didn't sleep that night. I kept picturing my daughter in that car, the stranger leaning toward her, the doors locked. I pictured different versions, worse ones. The ones you see on the news and think, those poor people. I'd almost become those poor people. By 3 a.m, I made a decision. We were going to make damn sure this man stayed far, far away from my daughter. And if the police weren't going to treat him like the danger he might be, I would. I came up with 2 steps. 1, make my daughter less easy to get to. 2, find out exactly who this stranger was and what his game was. Step 1 meant security. Emily fought me on it. She said she didn't want to live in fear, that she didn't want to be one of those women with bodyguards like a reality TV star. I ignored her. "Humor me," I said, standing in her sleek little condo 2 days later, looking at her flimsy front door and the glass patio slider that might as well have said, "Please break here." "Just for a month. Let me be overprotective. You can roll your eyes at me at Christmas." She looked exhausted. Big dark circles under her eyes, hands trembling whenever her phone buzzed. She'd installed one of those fancy camera doorbells overnight and had already jumped 4 times at the sound of someone delivering Amazon packages. "Fine," she sighed finally, rubbing her temples. "But nothing obvious. I don't want the whole office talking about how I'm being stalked, okay? I have enough trouble being taken seriously." Being a woman in corporate America, I didn't envy her. So I called an old friend whose son ran a private security firm now, mostly for executives and rich folks who like to cosplay being important. They did a sweep of her building, upgraded her locks, added an extra deadbolt, put a security bar on the patio door. They set up a little discreet camera in the hallway outside her unit, another in the parking garage where she parked. They also set her up with an escort service. No, not that kind. A security guy in plain clothes who would meet her at her car during certain hours and walk her to and from the building, staying just far enough back that it didn't look obvious. It wasn't cheap. Neither is a funeral. Step 2 meant a private investigator. That part was Mark's idea, actually. "If the cops aren't going to dig, we will," he said. "We'll get someone whose job is literally to obsess over strangers." So we did. His name was Doug. Late 40s, balding, ex-military. The kind of guy who looks like he's always leaning against something even when he's standing straight up. He came to my house the Monday after Thanksgiving, sat at my kitchen table, and listened. He listened to Emily describe the first time she noticed the stranger.
standing across the street from her office, pretending to look at his phone, but always in her line of sight.
How he'd shown up again outside the coffee shop she went to every morning. How she kept seeing him in different parts of downtown, just on the edge of the crowd. I thought I was being paranoid, she said, voice small. I told myself it was just some guy who happened to live in the same neighborhood. Then last week, he was outside my gym at 6 in the morning. He watched me walk into the building. I swear I felt him staring at my back. It was the same jacket, same backpack. That's when I knew I wasn't imagining it. Why didn't you tell us? Mark snapped, hurt bleeding into his tone. She gave him a look that could have curdled milk. Because I didn't want you to do exactly this, she said, to freak out, to treat me like I'm helpless. I'm 36, Mark. I reached over and put my hand on hers. You're also my baby, I said. Both things can be true. Doug took notes, asking simple, practical questions. Height, clothing, any distinguishing features, license plate on the black sedan she'd noticed a few times. Whoever he is, he's careful, Doug said. No social media, no name. You sure you've never seen him in your building or at work before this? She shook her head. Never. I would remember. There's something about his eyes. He nodded like he understood something I didn't. I'll start with his plate and the police incident report, he said. I'll see where that leads. In the meantime, if you see him again, you call me and the cops, okay? She nodded. I saw the way she looked at Doug, at his plain brown jacket and short, sensible hair, like she wanted to climb inside his competence and hide there. The next week was tense. You don't realize how much you move around the world assuming no one is watching you until someone definitely is. Emily called me every day, sometimes twice. Once just to say she'd made it from her car to the office without incident. The stranger didn't show up. Not at her building, not at her gym, not anywhere Doug's guys were quietly watching. You'd think that would make her feel better, but it was almost worse. It meant he'd either learned his lesson and vanished, or he'd gone underground and was waiting for a better opportunity. I know, I was spiraling. I had a lot of time on my hands, and a mother's imagination is a dangerous thing. 2 weeks later, Doug came back with a folder. I've got some answers, he said, sitting back at my kitchen table, same chair as before. My house had become command central without me really deciding it. And a few more questions. He slid the folder across the table to me. Inside were printouts, a driver's license photo, some public records, a couple of grainy screenshots from security cameras. I looked down at the license. Name, Evan Harper. Age, 18. 18. He looked older, but that might have been the stress. He's just a kid, I said, feeling a weird mix of relief and fresh dread. A kid shouldn't be doing things like this. Mark, sitting beside me, frowned. Harper? That last name sounds familiar. His address is in Shelbyville, Doug said. Registered to a couple named Jim and Diane Harper. I did a little more digging. He's technically their foster kid. He's been with them since he was 3. I blinked. Foster? So, he's... what? From the system? Doug nodded. Looks that way. He's bounced around a bit, a couple of placements that didn't stick, but the Harpers have had him the longest. So why my daughter? Out of all the women in Louisville, why is some foster kid latching onto her? Doug pulled out another sheet. This is where it gets interesting, he said. I ran his date of birth. October 16th, 20 years ago. A baby boy born at St. Mary's Hospital in Louisville. No father listed. Mother, Emily Grace Wilson. For a second, I didn't understand what I was reading. The words just sat there, black on white. Mother, Emily Grace Wilson. My daughter's full name. I felt my fingers go numb around the paper. That's not possible, I said, but my voice sounded far away to my own ears. Mom? Mark said softly. Mom, look at the year. I did. And suddenly, I was in our old kitchen, in the little rental house we lived in back when the kids were in high school. Emily at the table, books spread out, acceptance letters in a neat stack, Mark in the living room with his video games, the tension of senior year thick in the air.
The year she turned 18, the year she went off to college,
The year she came home for Thanksgiving break, 10 pounds heavier, and lived in baggy sweaters and refused to go swimming at the YMCA like she used to. I had chalked it up to dining hall food and freshman stress. I think there were some things going on, I heard myself say, my mind racing. Her senior year, she had that boyfriend. What was his name? Luke? They broke up suddenly. She cried for weeks. But she said, she swore, she never. I trailed off. I had done what a lot of mothers do, I think. I'd asked a few pointed questions about birth control and safe choices, and when she'd flushed and rolled her eyes and said, "I'm not stupid, Mom," I'd let myself be reassured. I never saw a baby. I never saw a belly big enough to hold one, but there are ways, I was realizing, that an 18-year-old girl can hide a pregnancy from a mother who's working 2 jobs and falling into bed at midnight. "Oh my God," I whispered, the edges of the paper cutting into my skin. "Are you telling me my daughter had a baby I never knew about?" Doug looked uncomfortable, like he'd just walked into a family fight he didn't want any part of. "I'm telling you that according to hospital records, an Emily Grace Wilson gave birth to a healthy baby boy on that date. The baby was surrendered 3 days later and placed in state custody. The file's mostly sealed, but I pulled what I could." I stared at the name and the birth mother line. Emily. My Emily. She'd been 18. Scared. Smart, but still half a kid herself. I hadn't been there. She hadn't let me be there. And now, 20 years later, some stranger, some boy, was following her around parking lots saying he needed to talk. I didn't need anyone to draw a line between those dots for me. I could see it clear as day. "Does he know?" I asked hoarsely. "Does this Evan know she's his mother?" Doug finished for me. "That's the part I'm not sure about. There's nothing in the records to show any contact. No letters exchanged, no visitation. He was pretty young when he went to the Harpers, and they don't list her name anywhere obvious." Mark was staring at the birth record like it might explode. "So he could have gone digging," he said slowly. "When he turned 18, he could have requested his file, found a name, found a city, and then found my daughter. Emily, who thought some random creep had picked her out of a crowd, not a ghost from her own past." I felt a wave of anger wash through me, hot and confusing. Anger at the stranger for scaring her. Anger at whoever had handled his adoption so poorly that he had to stalk a woman just to get answers. Anger at my daughter for what exactly? For being young and scared and making a decision without me? For not trusting me? For hiding something this monumental for 20 years? I didn't know where to put it all, so it just roiled around in my chest, making me feel like I'd swallowed acid. "What do you want to do with this?" Doug asked, careful. What I wanted was to rewind time 30 years and be the mother I thought I'd been. What I said was, "I want to talk to my daughter." Emily took one look at the birth record and stopped breathing. We were in her condo, sitting at her sleek glass dining table. It was a Sunday afternoon. The sun slanted in at that angle that makes everything look a little more honest than you'd like. She read the page once, twice. Then she pushed her chair back, stood up, and walked to the patio door like she needed fresh air, even though it was November and the balcony was cold. I watched her shoulders rise and fall. "Is it true?" I asked finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "Did you have a baby?" She pressed her forehead against the glass, fingers splayed. "When did you start looking into this guy?" she asked, not turning around. "The day after Thanksgiving. We hired a PI. I had to make sure you were safe." "Right." She let out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. "Safe." "Emily." My hands were trembling. "I'm not asking as a PI, I'm asking as your mother." That did it. She spun around, eyes blazing, cheeks wet. "Oh, now you're my mother. Now you want to know what's going on in my life. 20 years later?" The words hit me like slaps. "I've always wanted to know," I said, stung. "I could have helped you. I would have. Would you?" She cut in, crossing her arms.
Which you really have, Mom?
back when I was 18 and you were working double shifts and lecturing me about not ending up like half the girls in town? When you were so proud of me for being the first in the family to go to college? You would have been thrilled to find out I was pregnant, I'm sure. Her sarcasm was a knife. I opened my mouth, closed it. Because the truth is, she wasn't entirely wrong. If she had come to me at 18 and said, "I'm pregnant," I would have panicked. I would have worried about money, about school, about what my church friends would say. I would have done my best to be supportive, but I would have been scared, and she would have felt that. I would have tried, I said quietly. I would have sat with you on the kitchen floor and cried with you and looked at options. Well, I did all that, just not with you. She walked back to the table, sat down, and put her face in her hands for a moment. When she looked up again, the anger was still there, but so was something else. Sadness. Bone deep. Yes, she said finally. It's true. I had a baby when I was 18, a boy. I named him... It doesn't matter. I signed the papers 3 days later and handed him to a nurse and told myself I'd forget. My throat constricted. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. Her laugh was tired and brittle. "Do you really not know?" I shook my head, helpless. She leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling like she was watching a movie only she could see. I found out I was pregnant in February of senior year. I'd been nauseous, which I blamed on school food. Then I missed a period. Then another. I bought a test with cash at the drugstore in the next town so no one would know. It turned positive in 30 seconds. I remembered that spring. How moody she'd been. How much she'd cried when that boy, Luke, broke up with her. How she'd started wearing hoodies even when it was warm. I thought about telling you. 100 times. I'd sit at the kitchen table while you paid bills and looked at how tired you were and how stressed, and I'd open my mouth and then close it again. You were so excited about my scholarship, about me getting out. I didn't want to be the disappointment, the statistic. I felt like I'd swallowed a stone. You were never a disappointment, I said weakly. She gave me a sad smile. That's not how it felt back then. I didn't argue. Because whatever I had meant, what she'd felt was what mattered. What about his father? I asked. Did Luke know? Her jaw clenched. Oh, he knew. He also knew his parents would never allow their golden boy to get tied down. His dad was on the school board. His mom led the women's Bible study. They called me that girl from the wrong side of town, even when I got into college. I'd known they looked down on me and the kids. I hadn't known it went that far. When I told him, she said, he freaked. Then he calmed down and said we'd figure it out. He told his parents. They invited me over to talk. Her face twisted. They didn't yell. That would have been easier. They were polite. So polite. They told me how bright I was, how much potential I had, how a baby would ruin everything. They said they knew a lawyer who could take care of things. They'd pay for everything if I just signed. My stomach churned. You mean adoption? I said. Yes, she said. They arranged it all. Took me to appointments at a clinic in Lexington so no one local would see. Paid for a discreet OB. Luke stopped holding my hand in public, but still sneaked in my window at night, just for fun. His mother told me to wear baggy clothes. I got good at layering. You were at work all the time. And when you were home, you were so proud of me for studying. You never... I don't know, Mom. I guess I got good at walking sideways. I pictured her in oversized hoodies, the way she'd insisted on doing our Christmas photo from the shoulders up that year. The time I'd thought her face looked fuller but decided it was just the bad lighting. The plan was a closed adoption. No contact, no information. Best for everyone, the lawyer said. I went into labor alone in a hospital room because I told you I was staying with a friend to cram for finals. Luke showed up for 10 minutes, held my hand while I screamed, then left because his parents didn't want to see his car in the lot. I held my son for maybe an hour. Then the nurse came with the papers. I signed. They took him. She wiped her cheeks angrily.
I went back to campus 2 weeks later. I bled through pads for a month and cried in showers so my roommate wouldn't hear. After a while, I told myself it hadn't happened. That's what the Harpers promised, you know, that it'd be like a bad dream, like he never existed. She laughed bitterly. Funny thing about secrets, they don't stay buried. My eyes burned. Sweetheart, I said, why didn't you tell me later, when you went off to college, when you were older? We've had 20 years of conversations where you could have said, by the way, Mom, you're a grandmother. Because I was ashamed, she said simply. I told myself I'd made the right choice, that it was better this way. But every time I saw a baby or some coworker brought in their kid, I'd think that could have been my son. And then I'd feel sick, because if I let myself really think that, I'd have to admit I'd abandoned him. You were a scared teenager being manipulated by adults with money and lawyers, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. That's not abandonment. That's... She shook her head. Whatever we call it, he's out there. And if this PI is right, he's been following me, watching me. And I can't deal with that. I can barely deal with my own reflection some days. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking very small for a high-powered executive. So now you know, Mom, she said quietly. There it is, the big, ugly secret. Congratulations, you're a grandmother. Happy Thanksgiving. I felt something harden inside me. Not against her, never against her, but against the people who'd engineered this mess. Against the Harpers, against that lawyer who told an 18-year-old girl she'd forget. She hadn't, and neither had her son. Emily, I said slowly, if he is your son, and I think we both know he is, what do you want to do? Her eyes filled. I want him to go away, she whispered. I want him to have a good life somewhere else and never look at me the way he looked at me in that parking lot. Like what? Like he was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. Like I could fix something. I can't. I'm barely holding myself together as it is. I don't have room for... Her voice cracked. For him. I swallowed. And what if he doesn't go away? I asked gently. What if he keeps wanting answers? He's 18, honey. He can show up on your doorstep. He can show up at my doorstep. He has a right to know whether we like how he's going about it or not. She looked at me, panicked. You're not seriously thinking of talking to him, are you? I held her gaze. I'm thinking, I said, that someone needs to sit down with that boy and tell him the truth before he does anything desperate. And if his mother can't, maybe his grandmother can. I didn't sleep again that night. It's funny. At my age, not sleeping isn't a dramatic rebellion. It just means getting up twice to pee and staring at the ceiling while your joints throb and your brain reruns the highlight reel of every mistake you've ever made. Except now my highlight reel had a new star. A boy with my daughter's eyes, sitting in a beat-up sedan, shaking, saying, I just wanted to talk. I called Doug the next morning. Can you find him? I asked. Not just his address. I mean him. Somewhere neutral. There was a pause. You sure you want to do that? He asked. He might not be stable. Stalking behavior, even if it's motivated by something understandable, can escalate. I know. We'll meet somewhere public.
You can sit at the next table with your coffee and your gun. But I have questions, and I think he has answers." Doug sighed. "You Wilsons don't do anything halfway, do you?" He muttered. "All right, give me a day." He didn't even need that long. Turns out, when a young man has been obsessively circling a corporate office building for weeks, you can predict his patterns. We met 2 days later at a diner, just off the interstate, the kind with cracked red vinyl booths and coffee that's been sitting on the burner since the Clinton administration. I got there early and sat in a corner booth where I could see the door. Doug took a seat at the counter, looking like any other middle-aged guy minding his own business and absolutely not like backup. My hands shook as I wrapped them around the chipped coffee mug. What was I doing? I was about to meet a boy who might be my grandson.
A boy my daughter had carried and birthed and sent away, whose existence I'd been blind to while I worried about her prom dress and her SAT scores. The guilt was a living thing in my chest. The bell over the door jingled, and there he was. He looked smaller without the car and the adrenaline and the police lights. He scanned the room nervously, hands shoved in the pockets of his worn jacket. When his eyes landed on me, he froze. I raised my hand in a little wave. He walked over slowly, like he was approaching a wild animal. "Hi," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Evan, right?" "I'm Margaret, Emily's mother." His eyes widened slightly. Up close, the resemblance was worse. He had Emily's eyes. Not just the color, that warm hazel, but the way they crinkled at the corners when he squinted. The way his brows knit when he was confused. He had my father's jawline, too, strong and stubborn. He slid into the seat across from me, perching on the edge like he was ready to bolt. "I thought your daughter would be here," he said. His voice was lower than I expected, with a rough edge. "She doesn't know I'm meeting you," I said. "She's not ready." His face fell a fraction, and I hated myself a little for being the one to cause that. "You're not going to call the cops again, are you?" he asked, defensive. "Not unless you give me a reason to," I said calmly. "Do you want something to eat? You look like you run on caffeine and anxiety." His mouth twitched. "I'm not hungry," he muttered. I ordered him a burger anyway. I'm a mother. It's instinct. We sat in awkward silence for a minute, the clatter of dishes and the hiss of the grill filling the space. Finally, I said, "Evan, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I'd appreciate a direct answer." "Okay," he said warily. "Why have you been following my daughter?" His fingers twisted in his napkin. "I wasn't trying to scare her," he said quickly. I didn't know how to talk to her. Every time I got close, I'd freak out and walk away. I thought if I watched her long enough, I'd figure out what to say. "What did you want to say?" I asked, gently. He swallowed hard. "That I think she's my mother," he said, his voice barely audible. Time seemed to slow down. I heard Doug shifting at the counter, the cook flipping something, the waitress laughing with a trucker in the next booth. Inside myself, I heard my own heartbeat. I asked, "What makes you think that?" He pulled something out of his backpack and slid it across the table. It was a photocopy of a birth record, the same one I'd seen. I didn't need to read it to know what it said. When I turned 18, I asked for my file. You're allowed to ask if you're adopted. They don't have to give you everything, but I got the basics. I knew I'd been taken from my biomom when I was 3, but I didn't know why. My foster parents always said she couldn't take care of me. His lips twisted. I thought that meant drugs or jail or something like that. I spent years imagining she was dead or she'd forgotten me. Then I see this paper and it says she was 18 and in college. And she went on to finish her degree and get some fancy job, and I'm like, she could have kept me. She just didn't. The pain in his voice was like a physical thing in the booth between us. I wanted to reach across and squeeze his hand, but I didn't know if I had that right. "So you went looking?"
I said softly. He nodded. I had a name and a birthplace. It wasn't that hard to find a graduation announcement in some old college records. Then a LinkedIn, then articles where she's quoted as Emily Wilson, VP of whatever. His mouth quirked. She's kind of a big deal in her field. There's a headshot and everything. I watched her acceptance speech for some leadership award on YouTube like 20 times. There was pride in his voice despite everything, and that almost broke me. I wanted to hate her, he admitted. I did, but she looked nervous, you know? Like she didn't belong there. And she made this joke about her mom teaching her how to balance a checkbook before she could drive. He glanced up at me. That was you, right? I nodded, throat tight. Anyway, he said. Looking down at his hands, I saved up, took the bus to Louisville. I told my foster parents I was, visiting a friend. I figured I'd just walk up to her outside her office and say hi. He gave an embarrassed laugh, like that wouldn't be completely insane.
Every time I tried, my legs stopped working, so I just watched. He winced. I know how that sounds. Creepy, stalkery. I kept telling myself I'd do it the next day, then the next, then you showed up at her car on Thanksgiving. I finished for him. He flinched. I'd seen her leave early a couple of times, he said. She always looked like she was in a hurry. That day, she looked really happy, like she was going somewhere she wanted to be. I thought maybe she'd be in a better mood. I don't know. I waited by her car. When she got in, I just opened the door and slid into the driver's seat. He shook his head at himself, disgusted. As soon as I closed the door, she freaked out, he said. I tried to tell her I wasn't going to hurt her. I just wanted to talk. But the more I talked, the more she panicked. And then your son showed up, and you were banging on the window, and the police. He trailed off. I never meant for it to go like that. You locked the doors, I said quietly. I panicked, he said. I thought if she got out, that was it. I'd never get another chance. I wasn't thinking about how it would feel to her. He scrubbed his hands over his face. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know I scared her. I probably ruined any chance of actually getting to talk. We sat there in silence for a moment. The waitress came over with his burger, set it down, gave him a bright, oblivious smile, and walked away. The normalcy of it was almost surreal. Evan, I said finally, do you want revenge? He blinked. What? On Emily, I said, for giving you up, for not being what you imagined, I guess. His face crumpled. No, he said, horrified. God, no. I mean, I was angry when I first found out. I had this whole thing in my head where I'd show up at her fancy office party and make a scene, and everyone would see what she'd done. He grimaced. But then I thought about it, and I watched her more, and I realized she's just a person. She looked tired and lonely sometimes. I'd see her sitting in her car, staring at the steering wheel like she didn't want to go inside. I don't want to blow up her life. His voice went very small. I just want to know why I wasn't enough to keep. That was it. That was the sentence that snapped something in me. Because he wasn't talking to some abstract birth mother anymore. He was talking to the girl who'd sat at my old kitchen table, who'd done her homework under a lamp while I fell asleep on the couch, who'd carried this weight alone so I wouldn't be disappointed. He was talking about my daughter. And I realized who my revenge was for. Not him, not Emily. The people who decided with their money and their connections and their smug little Bible quotes that they got to erase a child because he was inconvenient. Evan, I said, my voice steady now, do you know the meme Luke Harper? He stiffened. Yeah, he said warily. My case file mentions a Le Harper paying some legal fees. My foster parents said that's the name of my bio father, but he never wanted to be involved. Why? I leaned back, feeling a cold clarity settle over me.
Because I do, I said. I want to be very involved. I'll be honest with you. I didn't start out planning revenge. I started out planning, I don't know, healing, closure, some Hallmark movie nonsense where we all cry and hug and learn about second chances. But then I started digging, and what I found lit a fire in me I didn't know I still had. Doug earned every penny of his fee. He dug into the Harpers, Luke and his parents, with the kind of methodical patience that makes me think all private investigators are just gossipers with better search tools. He found the lawyer who handled Emily's case back then, found out how many closed adoptions for teen mothers he had bragged about in firm newsletters, found the little donation the Harpers had made to his church the month Emily signed the surrender papers. He found records showing that Evan had been placed with a family that gave him back after a year because he cried too much, another that returned him because they weren't bonding. Both families had glowing reputations in their communities. He found documentation showing that when the Harpers took Evan in as foster parents, they'd received a state subsidy for his care, a subsidy that did not match the ragged shoes and the too small coats in his school pictures. He didn't get hit, Evan had said when I asked. They weren't monsters.
They just always made it clear I was extra, an obligation, like a stray dog they agreed to feed but didn't really want in the house. Watching Doug lay all of this out on my kitchen table one Thursday afternoon, something inside me shifted. Up until then, I told myself this was just a tragedy, a sad, complicated situation with no real villains, just a bunch of flawed humans making flawed choices. That was generous. Too generous. Because the more I learned, the more I saw a pattern. People with power making decisions that ruined the lives of people without it, and walking away feeling virtuous. The Harpers had wanted to protect their boy's future. They'd taken care of the problem. The lawyer had wanted to pad his numbers, be the go-to guy for delicate situations. The state had wanted boxes checked, paperwork filed, kids moved like inventory. And caught in the middle were my daughter and my grandson, both carrying scars from a choice that had never really been a choice. That's when the word revenge stopped feeling melodramatic and started feeling appropriate. Not revenge like slashing tires or keying cars or sending anonymous hate mail. Revenge like exposure. Revenge like consequences. Revenge like making sure the people who had done all of this didn't get to live out their golden years being praised for their good works without anyone knowing what they'd done. Luke's running for state senate, Doug said casually, tapping a printout of a campaign announcement he'd found. On a family values platform, of course. Lots of talk about supporting mothers and protecting children. Mark, who'd been looking more and more enraged as the afternoon went on, let out a disbelieving snort. "You have got to be kidding me," he said. I smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, "we are going to have some fun. Here's how we did it. I won't bore you with all the details, partly because it's complicated and partly because getting too specific about legal maneuvers makes the YouTube bots nervous, but I'll give you the broad strokes. Step 1, documentation. We made copies of everything. The birth record, the surrender papers, the subsidy records, the checks Luke's parents wrote to that lawyer's charity right when Emily's pregnancy was being handled. We wrote down Emily's account of that meeting in their living room, the pressure, the implied threats to her scholarship, the way they'd told her she'd regret it if she kept the baby. We got Evan's statement about his life in foster care. Nothing exaggerated, just the basics. The homes he'd been shuttled through, the emotional neglect, the way he'd been told his mother didn't want him. Step 2, legal backup. We found a lawyer. Not one who'd worked for the Harpers, obviously. A different kind. A woman in her 40s who'd made a career suing institutions that messed with vulnerable people. She read everything, listened to Emily and Evan, and blew out a long breath. "You've got a mess here," she said. "Some of this is too old to do much with in court, unfortunately. But there are angles. That's subsidy money, for one. If the Harpers were taking state funds and not using them for his care, that's fraud. And if Luke is running on some squeaky clean platform, well," she smiled, and there was more than a little shark in it. Opposition research is a beautiful thing. Step 3, confrontation. I insisted on being there for that part. We invited Luke and his parents to a reunion. That's what the email said, anyway. It came from Emily, who'd agonized over every word. We need to talk about something we did 20 years ago. I've been contacted by someone connected to that time. I think it would be better if we had this conversation face to face. I half expected them to ignore it or tell her to pound sand. Instead, they replied within an hour. Of course, dear. We're always here for you. Why don't you come by for dinner Sunday? We'll make your favorite lemon pie. Like nothing had ever happened. We didn't go to their house. They came to mine. I wanted home field advantage, and I also didn't want my daughter stepping into the scene of her trauma again. So Sunday afternoon, there we were. Me in my favorite blue cardigan, trying to look like just another nice grandmother offering lemonade in the living room. Emily, pale but upright, sitting on the edge of the couch.
Evan, nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs, in the armchair by the window. He'd wanted to skip this part, but I'd told him he had a right to hear what they said about him. And Mark, leaning in the doorway like a bodyguard, arms crossed. When the doorbell rang, my heart rate spiked. I opened the door to find the Harpers on my porch, looking exactly like I remembered, just older. Jim Harper had gone soft around the middle, but his handshake was still firm, and his smile still politician bright. Diane had the tight, smooth face of a woman who'd discovered Botox and Jesus in equal measure. Luke stood behind them, a little gray at the temples now, but still handsome in that bland catalog way. "Margaret," Diane trilled, air-kissing the space near my cheek. "It's been too long." "Not long enough," I said cheerfully, stepping back. "Come on in." They swept into my living room like they owned it. The moment Diane saw Emily, her face crumpled into what I suppose she thought was a sympathetic expression. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, reaching for Emily's hands. "We've been praying for you every day. When we got your email, I told Jim our girl needs us. Our girl." I saw Emily flinch at the phrase, but she held her ground. "Hi, Mrs. Harper," she said stiffly. "Mr. Harper, Luke." Luke gave her a practiced, sheepish smile. He said, "You look great, really successful. I see you on LinkedIn sometimes. I'm proud of you." I almost choked. They hadn't seen Evan yet. He'd gone very still in his chair, eyes darting between their faces. "Why don't we sit down?" I said. "We have some things to discuss that won't go well if we're standing in the entryway pretending this is a potluck." We settled in. I took my usual chair, Emily on the couch, the Harpers opposite, Evan in the corner, half in shadow, Mark hovering like he was waiting for someone to say the wrong thing. Luke's eyes flicked to Evan a couple of times, but there was no recognition there. I'd thought about introducing him right away. I decided to let the Harpers hang themselves a bit first. "Emily said this was about the past," Jim said, folding his hands in his lap. "We've always been willing to talk about that time, what we all went through. It was such a hard season for everyone." I smiled, all teeth. "Yes," I said, "especially for the 19-year-old girl giving birth alone in a hospital room." Diane's smile tightened. "We did what we thought was best for her, for everyone. We made sure she could go to college. We gave that baby a chance at a stable home. I don't know why we're rehashing all of this now." "Because that baby turned 18 and went looking for answers. And the answers he got from his file don't line up with the story you've been telling yourselves." Diane glanced again at Evan, frowning. "Who is this?" I leaned forward. "This," I said, "is Evan, your son." The silence that fell was thick enough to choke on. Diane went pale under her carefully applied makeup. Jim's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Luke actually stood up, hands out. "That's not funny." "No," I agreed. "It's not." Evan stood up too, his hands shaking. "My case file says my bio father's last name is Harper. My birthday is October 16th. My birth mother's name is Emily Wilson. You really want to do the math out loud, or should we skip to the part where you tell me why you signed me away like a bad check?" Luke's face flushed an ugly red. I was a teenager. I didn't sign anything. My parents. Oh, don't you dare throw us under the bus, Diane snapped, sitting up straighter. We did what any good parents would do. We protected our son's future. We found a solution. A solution? That's what you call a child? She glared at me. You stayed out of it back then. You left the decision to Emily. I always admired you for that. You respected her autonomy. I laughed, cold. I stayed out of it because no one told me a damn thing. You schemed behind my back. You took my daughter to your lawyer friend. You told her she'd ruin her life and Luke's if she kept the baby. You promised he'd go to a loving home and she'd forget. Diane's lips thinned. We never said it would be easy, but it was the right choice. Emily, tell them. You know it was. We all looked at Emily. She sat very still, staring at her hands. I thought I didn't have a choice, she said finally.
You told me my scholarship would mysteriously disappear if anyone found out. You told me your husband would have to resign from the board in shame if the town knew his son knocked up the waitress's daughter. Her eyes lifted hard. You told me my own mother would judge me. I never said that, Diane protested. You didn't have to, Emily said. You implied it, with every little dig about girls from my side of town, with every story about some cousin who threw her life away having babies. You made it very clear which option would make me a good girl in your eyes. She stood up, fists clenched. I loved him, she said, nodding toward Luke. Stupid, I know, but I did. When you're 18 and some boy with a car and a Letterman jacket says he wants to marry you someday, you believe him. I would have run away and lived in a trailer with him if he'd asked. Instead, he sat there while you two convinced me to hand over my son like he was something I'd broken and you were taking back to the store. Luke looked at the carpet. Em, I was scared, he muttered. So was I, she shot back. The difference is I did something brave. I carried him. I labored. I signed papers I didn't understand. You just went to college like nothing happened. Jim cleared his throat. This is all very emotional, he said, but it was 20 years ago. Mistakes were made, perhaps, but nothing illegal. I don't see what dredging this up is supposed to accomplish, other than upsetting everyone. That's when I smiled. Really smiled. Oh, honey, I said, you have no idea. I reached down and picked up the folder on the coffee table, the one with the sticky notes and the careful tabs. This, I said, tapping it, is a collection of everything we've learned in the last month. Your donations, your lawyer's notes, the state subsidy forms for Evan's foster care, the times you spoke in church about supporting young mothers while your son's girlfriend cried herself to sleep in a dorm bathroom. I tilted my head. And now you're running for office on a family values platform. Isn't that cute? Diane's face had gone from pale to blotchy. You're not making any sense, she said, but her voice shook. I make perfect sense, I said. Here's what's going to happen. You are going to sit there and listen to your son and your grandson and the girl you pressured, and you are going to understand why this, I waved the folder, is not just a youthful mistake. It's a pattern. And then we are going to discuss how we handle this before the rest of the world finds out. Jim bristled. Are you threatening us? He demanded. Yes, I said pleasantly. I am. Sometimes it's freeing to say the quiet part out loud. You can't blackmail a candidate. That's illegal. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for favors. I don't want a damn thing from you except honesty and accountability. If you choose not to give it, then I will exercise my right as a citizen and a mother and a grandmother to tell this story publicly, every messy detail, with documents.
I will send it to every local reporter, every church group, every Facebook page full of gossipy old women like me. And if you want to call that blackmail, you go right ahead." Luke looked stricken. "Jesus, Em, is this really necessary? I've built a life, a career. I'm trying to do some good now." "Good built on lies," Emily said softly. "You had a chance to do good 20 years ago, Luke. You could have stood up to your parents. You could have said, 'This is my child. I'll work 2 jobs, I'll delay college, I'll move into some crappy apartment, but I'll be there.' You didn't. You let me take all the weight. And he," she gestured to Evan, who was shaking, tears in his eyes, "he carried the rest. So forgive me if I don't feel sorry for your campaign." Silence. Then Evan spoke. "I don't care about your election," he said to Luke. "I don't care about the church or the board or any of that. I just want you to look at me. For real." Luke did. "I'm your son. You don't know anything about me. You don't know my favorite food or the sound I made when I slept as a baby or the way I used to line up my toy cars by color. You don't know how many times I got in trouble at school because I couldn't stop talking in class. You don't know anything. You had 20 years to care. You didn't. That's on you. Not some election."
His voice cracked on the last word. I felt my own eyes burned. Luke swallowed hard. "I'm sorry," he said. And for the first time, I believed he meant it. I was a coward. I won't pretend otherwise. I thought about you sometimes, but I told myself it was too late to do anything, that you were in a good home, that what we'd done was merciful. He looked at Emily. "We were wrong." Diane made a small, wounded noise. "Luke, don't," she started, but he cut her off. "Mom, stop," he said, and there was steel in his voice I'd never heard before. "We weren't the victims here." He took a deep breath. "What do you want?" he asked, looking at Emily, then at me, then at Evan. "Tell me, and I'll do it. I can't change the past, but if there's something I can do now that isn't just disappearing, I'll do it." Emily and I exchanged a look. This was the moment, the fork in the road. We talked about it before, late at night, just the 2 of us at my kitchen table. The fantasies, the temptations. We could take him for everything he had. We could sue, drag them through court, demand money for Evan's pain and suffering until they were ruined. It would have felt satisfying in a shallow way, like scratching an itch until you bleed. But money wasn't what my daughter needed. She needed her own story back. She needed the shame they'd planted in her to land where it belonged. My revenge wasn't about draining their bank accounts. It was about watching their reputations crumble under the weight of the truth. "We want you to tell the truth," I said, publicly. Jim snorted. "Be serious," he said. "I am," I replied. "You don't get to stand in front of cameras talking about supporting families while the girl you coerced into giving up her baby quietly carries all the blame. You don't get to collect claps at the Rotary Club while people like Evan grow up thinking they were unwanted. You want to run for office? Fine. Run on the real story, the one where you messed up and hurt people and are trying to make amends. Or don't run at all." Luke looked at his father, at his mother. Diane shook her head vehemently. "You will not throw away your future for this," she hissed. "We dealt with it. It's over." Evan let out a bitter laugh. "It's not over for me," he said. "It'll never be over. I live with it every day. When I fill out a medical history form and have to check unknown, when I see some jerk yelling at his kid in Walmart and think, at least he showed up. You don't get to declare the game over just because you're tired of playing." Jim stood up, adjusting his jacket like he was about to give a speech. "This is ridiculous," he said. "We're leaving. Luke, let's go. We'll talk to our lawyers about this attempted extortion." He turned toward the door. "Dad," Luke said quietly. "Sit down." Jim blinked. "What?"
Luke's shoulders sagged, but his voice was firm. Sit, he repeated. Slowly, grudgingly, Jim sat. Luke looked at us. You're right. If I keep running and this comes out later, it'll look like I tried to hide it. Because I did. If I drop out now without saying why, the rumor mill will go insane and it'll still hurt you. He grimaced. If I go public, it will be ugly. People will judge. They'll drag Emily's name too. Not if you handle it right, our lawyer had told us. Control the narrative. Frame it as your sin, not hers. We've talked to an attorney, I told him now. She's good. She'll help make sure the messaging focuses on your responsibility and Emily's youth and vulnerability. You want to model family values? Show people what accountability looks like. Diane stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Luke, you can't seriously be considering this, she said. Everything we've worked for. We, he cut in. Or you. She flinched. Mom, he said gentler. I love you. I know you thought you were helping back then, but we hurt people. Emily, Evan, Mrs. Wilson. We can't fix that by pretending it never happened. I'm tired of living like I'm two people. He looked back at us. I'll do it, he said. I'll withdraw from the race. I'll make a statement. I'll name what we did. I'll say I pressured Emily, that my parents did, that we're trying to make it right. It'll cost me, but maybe it'll help someone else in the same spot now make a different choice. A strange thing happened then. I believed him. Maybe I'm a sucker. Maybe I just wanted to believe that even the people who hurt my kids weren't irredeemable. Either way, the decision was made.
We didn't need to drag them through the courts. We were going to drag them through the light. The fallout was satisfying. I won't lie. Luke held a press conference 3 days later. He stood there in front of the cameras looking like every generic political hopeful you've ever seen. Only this time, instead of spouting platitudes, he told the truth. He said he'd fathered a child at 18. He said he and his parents had pressured the girl into a closed adoption to protect his future. He said that girl, Emily, had carried the weight alone while he pretended it never happened. He said his son had come looking for answers and he'd been found wanting. He cried. Real tears, not the on-command kind. He withdrew from the race. The local news gobbled it up. Some people praised him for his honesty and courage. Others called him a hypocrite who only came clean because the truth was about to come out anyway. Both things could be true. Diane lost her spot as the head of the church women's group. Too much bad press. Jim quietly retired from the board a few months later to spend more time with family. Funny how sin looks different when it's in the bulletin. Did it fix everything? Of course not. It didn't give Evan back his childhood. It didn't undo the nights Emily had spent staring at the ceiling wondering if she'd gone to hell. It didn't erase my own guilt for being so busy surviving that I missed my daughter's silent drowning. But it did something important. It took the shame off their shoulders and dumped it where it belonged. Every time someone in our town whispered about that poor girl who gave up her baby, the whisper now included, and that boy whose parents railroaded her. People stopped clucking their tongues at Emily and started side-eyeing the Harpers. That was my revenge. Not blood, not broken bones, just a slow, steady crushing of their spotless image under the weight of the truth they'd tried to bury. And what about us? You're probably wondering if we got our hallmark ending. The answer is, kind of. The night of the press conference, I had them all over to my house. Emily, Evan, Mark. We ordered pizza and sat on the floor like teenagers. The TV in the corner was still playing Luke's tearful apology on repeat. Emily stared at the screen like she was watching someone else's life. I can't believe he actually did it, she said softly. I can, I said. Guilt is a powerful motivator. So is the fear of me showing up at his church potluck with a folder. She chuckled, the sound watery but real. You're terrifying, you know that, she said. I've always been terrifying. You're just appreciating it more now. Evan was sitting cross-legged by the coffee table, a plate in his lap. He'd been quiet most of the night, processing. Finally, he looked up. So what happens now? He asked. It was the question we'd all been circling.
Emily swallowed. I don't know, she said honestly. I don't know how to be your mom. I don't know if I even can. I'm not pretending this is an instant happy family. I'm in therapy twice a week just trying to like myself right now. He nodded, accepting that in a way that made me proud of him. I don't know how to be your son, either. I have a family. They're not perfect, but they're mine. I'm not looking to replace them. I want to know you, if that's okay. Slowly. Like coffee, sometimes. Texts, maybe you come to one of my soccer games. We figure it out as we go. She smiled, small and shaky. I think I can do that. Coffee, I understand. He grinned. Okay, he said, we'll start with coffee. They stayed late that night. We talked about little things, his favorite music, her worst professor in college, the time Mark accidentally microwaved a fork and almost burned down my kitchen. Every time I looked at Evan, I saw flashes of the baby I'd never held. His laugh sounded like Emily's used to when she watched Saturday morning cartoons. The way he wrinkled his nose when he didn't like a new food was pure Mark at 5. I felt this fierce, ridiculous swell of love for him, this boy who'd come into my life sideways, dragging a storm behind him. Later, when everyone had gone home, I walked around my quiet house picking up cups and plates. In the hallway, I paused. There, on the wall, was a framed photo from the year Emily went off to college.
She's standing in front of our old house, backpack on, smile big and forced. I'd always loved that picture. It represented everything I'd worked for, my daughter getting out, doing better than I had. Now I saw it differently. I saw the shadows under her eyes, the way her hand rested protectively on her stomach, even though I'd never noticed that pose before. I reached out and touched the glass. I'm sorry, I whispered to the girl in the photo. I should have seen you. My reflection looked back at me, older, worn, but not broken. People think revenge is about rage. Sometimes it is. For me, it was about something quieter. Justice. Not the kind with gavels and juries, though there's a place for that. The kind where you look the people who hurt your children in the eye and say, no more. You don't get to hide behind your good name while they carry your sins. On Thanksgiving, I thought my world was falling apart when my daughter called me from that car. I didn't know it was actually cracking open, making room for a boy with my father's jaw and my daughter's eyes. These days, when the holidays roll around, my house is a little louder. Evan comes over, usually a bit late because he's still terrible at time management. He brings whatever dessert he tried to bake and half burned. Emily makes fun of him and then secretly eats 2 pieces. Mark drags him into the den to argue about sports. Sometimes it's awkward. Sometimes old wounds ache. Sometimes Emily disappears onto the back porch for 10 minutes to breathe. But every time I see him sitting at my table, passing the mashed potatoes, listening to one of my boring stories about the good old days, I feel that knot in my chest loosen a little more. I couldn't change what happened 20 years ago. I couldn't give my daughter back her lost baby or my grandson back his lost mother. But I could make damn sure the people who orchestrated their suffering didn't get to ride off into the sunset unscathed. I could choose them now. I could sit in the messy middle, hold both their hands and say, we're here. We're not going anywhere. You were always enough. That's my revenge. Not just what I did to the Harpers, but what I refused to let them keep. They don't own our story anymore. We do.
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video. Bye bye!